Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest edition of the Black Bird's Eye View. I'm Robin Mills, putting some information in the air like I do sometimes. I thought I'd take the time to introduce you guys to yet another NC pioneer. Today, I want to introduce you to Watsi M. Sutton. I've been doing a series, it's called The Black Man Speaks, and basically I've been speaking to brothers, asking them about, different sets of circumstances that surround being born Black in America. And I thought just for the purpose of balance that I would make sure I include our Black woman speaks. And I'm so thrilled today to have Watsi M. Sutton here with me. She is an attorney out of Washington, North Carolina. She graduated from Washington High School in 1994 with highest honors and obtained a bachelor's in science economics at the North Carolina Agriculture and Technical State University in 1997, graduating summa cum laude only 3 years of college. So if we know nothing else, we know she's got some good learning sense. So this should be a good conversation. Attorney Sutton pursued and obtained her law degree from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill School of Law in 2000 and was licensed to practice law by North Carolina State Bar in August of 2000. Before opening her own office, Watsi M. Sutton served as the Assistant District Attorney for the Honorable Seth H. Edwards, comprising Beaufort, Hyde, Martin, Tyrrell, and Washington County. I'm just going to leave it right there because her resume is steep. But I want you to know that this is a sister who has a law firm in Washington, North Carolina. She is the mother of I think her son is, how old is he? 22?
21.
21 years old. So first and foremost, let me just welcome you for being here today. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you so much, Robin. This is such an honor. I know we're going to have some great conversation, and just thank you for having me.
You are most welcome. Like you like to say, let's just get into it. That's my new Watsi Sutton expression. Get into it. Yeah.
Let's get into it.
Let's get into it. First and foremost, is there anything in particular that stands out in your mind that you would like to start with?
Well, I think something that seems pretty relevant for today, the passing of John Lewis, and having had an opportunity to listen as I've been traveling between counties and between courthouses today, listening to his funeral services and President Obama's eulogy and the other speakers and all that they said about him and his life and his legacy and his work. And it just has caused me to be real pensive and tearful at times, just regarding just the state of our world, how far we've come, but yet how far there is to go. And as much as certainly with, I believe you mentioned the topic relative to the brothers you spoke with regarding being born Black in America and how that comes with precarious burden. And at the same time, what has struck me today is that it also comes with awesome opportunity. And that seems a little contradictory because the fight obviously for opportunity economically, politically, educationally, even certainly in public health, and every sector of society that I can think of where, just looking at the numbers, African Americans always seem to be at the bottom of the heap and the disparities, large, and they are. And that is the byproduct of, and I would say intentional byproduct of systemic racism that exists, no question about it. However, or rather in addition to, let me say that, in addition to, I believe that provides perhaps, at least as I view it, a greater mantle of purpose. And I think perhaps that is what has had me, in addition to, recounting all the stories relative to John Lewis's life and the things that he endured and the accomplishments that he was able to make as really a modern founding father of this country, or at least the country that we ought to be. Um, but just the weight of purpose and the weight of the mantle of purpose, and the necessity to walk out and live in that purpose, because lives depend on it. Millions depend on it. Our future, not just our future, but our present, our life outcomes depend on it.
Mhm.
And that has just been very heavy on me today.
Okay, then. You said a mouthful. You said a mouthful. Hmm. When you think about, when I say black men, I don't necessarily mean just black men. I mean black people in general.
I
Um,
understand.
when we look at what's going on, I mean, anyone who has access to social media, internet, any type of newspaper, word of mouth, and it's not something new that's happening. It's just something that's being televised. Um, do you think it was an accurate statement to say that a handful of corrupt police officers have in some way waged war on people of color? And if that be the case, the talk about reform in terms of retraining the police officers, there's been talk about, the fact that they the amount of money that they make for risking their lives every day isn't just it just doesn't fit what they have to do. They're talking about raising their pay grade and things of that nature. Do you think there is a such thing as reform? Do you think reform will work? And if so, have you given any thought to how would a person go about retraining the mindset of someone who is potentially foundationally a racist?
That is certainly a question with many parts loaded. Your questions are always thoughtful and deep. So let's kind of get into that and try to unpack it somewhat. In terms of, to start with the statement as to whether or not I think a handful of officers have waged war on Black folks in America, I don't know that it's a handful. I certainly don't. I don't personally subscribe to the belief, and that is in large part because of my practice here in a rural small town in eastern North Carolina, in the South, having worked with mostly um, Caucasian officers. They're not, as you can imagine, just not a lot of African American. We actually have an African American police chief now in this city, but even the force that he commands um, is, I think there may be three or four, maybe, Black officers and mostly white officers, and even fewer with the sheriff's department. So let me first say, I don't think, just based on my practice, I practice criminal law in addition to some other areas of the law, particularly around representing first-time offenders, particularly young people who just made some bad decisions. I've had a number of clients over the years who there wasn't any question about whether or not it was guilt or innocence. It was guilt. Now there I've had as many who were not, but my point is, I've had many clients over the years who were surely guilty. Had we tried the case, they would have surely been found guilty. They would have surely had convictions that would have made an already difficultly stacked deck even more difficult in terms of educational opportunity, job opportunity, etc., with a felony conviction. And I've seen lots of circumstances over my 20 years of practice whereby officers were willing to work with me to give that individual a second opportunity. And in
Mhm.
fact, what I would often do is recruit the officer to then help me negotiate with the DA. So I've seen it work. I've seen it work well. I've seen particularly young people who should have had a second chance because other folks have a second chance, and that's not always been that way. So I certainly have seen that. Having said that, however, and I always think it's important to be balanced. So I definitely want to state that. But it's hard to say that it's a handful across the nation when we constantly see um, news article after news article, video, dash cam footage after dash cam footage of unarmed Black folks, mostly men, being either gunned down in the street or choked to death in the street or some other, means of robbing them of their life. So it's difficult for me to say that it's a handful because it seems to happen so frequently, number one. And I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I can recall maybe in 2015 to 2016, not long after the Michael Brown shooting, we were getting these stories so rapidly that just the mother in me could not take watching another video, reading another article, because it just would hit too close to home in terms of just considering, you know, just the life, the potential of those young people cut short over something so insignificant. And I think that is what, well, a lot of it obviously just the thought is grievous, particularly as a mom of a 21-year-old Black young man. That's grievous. But even the advocate in me, the attorney in me, questions what is really going on here? And the reason is because Michael Brown was jaywalking. Well, Ahmaud Arbery, obviously, he wasn't even committing any criminal offense from what I can see. Obviously, he was just jogging, just doing life while Black. But Sandra Bland, a speeding ticket. Eric Garner selling loose cigarettes or unregulated cigarettes. Most of the offenses, the minor offenses that have resulted in the deaths of Black men and women that we've come to know their name via the news of one more unarmed shooting, was initiated by some minor offense for which they could have just received a ticket and been sent on their way. We're not talking about situations where someone, Rashard Brooks, a DWI investigation. We're not talking about a situation where someone was being pursued for armed robbery or being pursued for, going, armed to the terror of the people or having just murdered, 9 folks in a church in Charleston. We're talking about extremely minor offenses that somehow seem to escalate to the point of a fatal encounter when all that I can see in terms of the commonality of them is just this level of irrational fear. And I understand what the law says about, unarmed, about reasonable force and the use of reasonable force, but there's a line that seems to be crossed time and time again relative to whether, the road defense. I was afraid for my life. I didn't know, if Philando Castile was going for his gun when, he's already told you and he's got his hands where you can see him as being completely cooperative. However, there's this, just this innate visceral reaction, almost it seems. I won't say it's all because I know better. My practice tells me better, but there certainly is a contingent. And I don't know that it's a handful. It seems to me it's got to be more than a handful, or if it is a handful, it certainly is widespread across this nation. But there's just this visceral, it seems, this visceral fear, this innate fear of Black people, which to me seems to harken back to this lack of humanity. I think when you see someone as not human, or you see someone as other than you are, it is easier to respond to them in such a visceral and violent manner. Clearly, Dylan Roof, for instance, with the shooting in Charleston, how it is that you could sit and pray with somebody and enjoy their hospitality and they are welcoming of you, warm towards you, and you pull out a machine gun essentially and gun them down, that is one of the most reprehensible crimes I think I could think of. However, to have the officers who go and apprehend him, make sure he's okay,
Give him Burger
find
King.
out if he wants something to eat, let's stop by Burger King, make sure you're good before you go in. Just the level of humanity shown to him, who is a mass murderer. And I'm not suggesting that you should be inhumane to anybody. I don't believe that. I've, as an assistant DA, I've had several situations wherein I'm the assigned DA on the morning of, or the next morning after a murder has occurred, and have to be the, at least the initial DA who arraigns that person or what have you. I was just always taught and believed that everybody ought to be taught, everyone ought to be treated with dignity. So even that person, despite whatever they just did last night, I can still look at them, sir, no sir, etc., and be, even as the victim of a murder myself. My father was killed when I was a baby, so I somewhat feel like I have some credibility to talk about that.
You do.
But to have that degree of humanity and concern shown to someone who has taken 9 lives, if you can muster that, then surely you ought to be able to muster the same level of humanity and dignity and respect shown for someone who is just selling some cigarettes. You could, I mean, that officer could have written him a ticket, sent him on his way. He could have gone to court, be heard, have his day in court, whatever. But to be, the prosecutor, the judge, the executioner, right there on the sidewalk, and to stamp that person as someone who's not worthy to breathe, and the only encounter you've had is in that moment, and the only thing you know about them is, their size and their skin color. I don't know how to process that in a manner that says that is normal, or that it is anything other than a lack of recognition that we are as human as the next person, that we bleed, that we breathe, that we, feel, that we have aspirations, that we want to get home to our families just the same. And it's deeply concerning. It's deeply concerning.
Mm-hmm. I don't know that. And I'm working on my.
I
I'm
didn't
working
answer
on.
your question.
Say again.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I didn't actually get to the rest of your question. I got kind of
I know.
emotional with that.
I, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I know you didn't. I just wanted to interject for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
And trust me, I don't ask everybody a bunch of questions at one time. I know you can. I know you can handle answering a multitasking type question. But
Thank you.
no, you're welcome. Um, I don't know that it's fear, Watsy. The first thing they say is, as one of the first things that the police officers say is, for whatever reason they fear, they fear, they fear. Um, if it is fear, I don't think it's the type of fear that they're talking about. Um, on a deep seated level, when you think about melanin, what we need to be, and what they lack, and are just genetically not inclined to produce color producing pigment. I think on a subconscious level, what happens between the black race and the white race really does boil down to a fear of annihilation, whether they want to admit it or not. It's not a coincidence that it's black men and black women. You know, I've been reading who is it? Francis Cress Welsing's the ISIS papers. I don't know if you guys. I'm talking to my listeners. Y'all need to read that. For someone who doesn't want to sit and read a whole book, she has hers broke down in papers, so it's different topics. Y'all need to read that, and it goes into what this fear is. Because the white man can't be angry at the black man, for the black man has done nothing but benefit the white man. So he's not acting out trying to kill him because he's angry. So and if he's afraid, it's not because he's afraid for his life, because he's the one with the gun. You know what I mean? So it's a different kind of fear. Anyway, I just wanted to interject because I want to revisit that later. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So even to your point, I do think that if you look at the foundation of policing, or the historical root of policing in this country, it certainly grows out of the slave catcher or the overseer roles that existed during slavery, and the need to control and immobilize slaves, and keep them, from running, and bringing them back if they do, and just a heavy-handed sense of power
Mm,
wielded
yeah.
over, those who were seen as being inferior.
Mm,
And in order to be a superior class, in order to be superior, it necessitates having something or someone to which you feel superior above, or
mm,
who you deem it being, or who you deem is inferior to. And that is in no way to say that that is a context or a construct that is grounded in reality. It seems very fantastical, to be quite honest. But certainly, it seems real clear if you look at even the writings of Abraham Lincoln, Benjamin Franklin, some of the, Thomas Jefferson, many of the founding fathers, who really, even in their, intellectual exposition of, regarding the state of, the black slave, they really genuinely seem to believe that we were an inferior species, almost, or subset of humanity. And it seems to me that that same level of, I don't know, when if I in insane fear, I don't know that it is necessary. Well, actually, let me back that up. A lot of the references, I went back and had an opportunity to read some references to the three of the slave narratives, the life of Olaudah Equiano, the narrative of a slave girl, which talks about Linda Brent, um, the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, all of whom were slaves who became free. And they often recount being referred to as savages. So if you refer to someone from a historical foundation, if you refer to someone as a savage, or you're almost equating them, that's almost like an animal like metaphor, right?
yeah,
Someone
but
who's not
look, but let me just
sophisticated
ask
from.
a question before you move forward. Let me just ask a question, because when we talk in paragraph forms, we miss out on the to and fro. Quick question. You said that they refer to them as savages. Could it not be
No,
that
the slave owners often refer to the
to them?
slaves as
Yes,
savages, right?
I
The
get it.
freed slaves recount that, and all three do in their
No,
narratives.
no, I get it. I just wanted to make sure I heard it right.
Sure.
So could it not be that you have the oppressor had to act as though the African slaves were savages and anything but human to justify the mistreatment of them? Because
Absolutely.
if the oppressor had said, "This is a man like I am a man," who's going to stand for that? Do you know what I mean? Other than people who are racist to the core. I think a lot of what go ahead.
No, no, I was just agreeing with you, and that was ultimately where I was going with the comment, is to say that they were told that they were savages, they were told and treated in ways that reinforced this inferiority. But the inferiority seems to me to have been a false construct, or a necessary false construct, in
Mm,
order to build upon it superiority over this race of people. Because, and particularly if you consider that these folks are supposedly ascribing to be to be Christians, good Christian people, how else can the mind permit itself to treat and brutalize and mishandle and rape and kill and all of the horrific treatment that slaves endured? How else does one in their mind, as you said, justify that level of treatment to someone who is seen as their equal? Well, that was because we were not, and that was clearly written into our founding documents. We were three-fifths a person, and there was some, obviously some. I think it's interesting when you think about slavery and how it was justified and how it even came to be. It's intertwined with greed.
with grief,
Inter it, with
greed.
greed,
Oh yeah.
greed. Right, intertwined with greed. So, okay, we want, to build this country. We want to be an independent economic power. So, okay, the way we'll do this is to bring, we'll steal free labor and make them submit. But how do you make a person submit but for you create a construct wherein you control the narrative, or you control, their beliefs about who they are and what their abilities are and who you are, and creating a level of fear and creating a level of submission around this superior slash inferior um, construct or complex. So I think I don't disagree with that. I certainly believe that that was a necessary construct to allow the mind to rationalize that treatment.
Hmm.
And the unfortunate part of I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Um, I just want to get some questions in.
Sure, go ahead.
My
We'll be
question,
talking very
no, I think that is beautiful. You are writing your own article. All I have to do is transcribe it, like literally. And this is just in keeping with what you're saying. Do you think that the constructs that were created to change the narrative exist today? And that's not for me. I'm not telling you to change the subject. I just kind of want you to put that in there too.
Let me get you to repeat your question.
Do you think that the constructs that you mentioned before that were put in place to change the narrative, do you think that those constructs that were set in place so that they could control the African slaves is the same construct on a different level that is used now? Or do you think we've evolved from that mental programming? You follow me?
Well, I know I follow you. I think I follow you precisely. I think that is your question elucidates or illuminates rather the development or the evolution from slavery to now we've got freedmen who are beginning to become educated and build their own schools and build their own businesses and become full, and I say full in quotes, but full participating citizens, right? They're
Right.
building their own communities and becoming self-sufficient. So now we don't have that level of control, and they seem to be successful at it. So now we've got to introduce, Jim Crow. We've
Mm,
got to introduce, some other um, legal means, another legal means of control. Fast forward, through Jim Crow, the Ku Klux Klan era, the establishment of that. Once you get through the segregationist era, once the now or the former slave, now free, now having obtained some degree of political awareness, now having obtained some degree of political power, some degree of organizing abilities and gathers together and say, we're not going to stand for this, you have another morphing. It seems at each level of progress, there has been some new systemic level of oppression, some new systemic means of control exerted to hold in place, the level of progress that Black folks have seen or see in this country. So I absolutely do think that it has evolved. I would be completely naive, though I think we've made tremendous progress. I think that we would be absolutely naive to say that we don't have a ton of tremendous progress more yet to be had. Clearly, systemic racism is just as embedded in the fabric of this country as any other symbol or any other symbolism that you might associate with this nation. We were literally founded upon racism and the stealing and violent treatment of African slaves. You can't sow those types of seeds in a country and expect to harvest something different without some serious changing of the heart, even changing of legislation. Because until a person sees someone as equal, and that's a function of that's a character function. That's a function within. We can change as many laws as we like, and we should, and it's necessary because it's the system within which we have to work. However, until a person changes their perspective, which is a heart thing, then I can't see a person as my equal until my perspective changes. And that isn't necessarily about the fact that the law says, okay, well, you're no longer 3/5 a person, you're a whole human being, or you're no longer required to, use segregated restrooms, or you can now freely travel and sleep at any hotel you want, and eat at any restaurant wherever you care to eat in the restaurant. You don't have to go out the back door. Even though those laws change, clearly we still have an element that harkens back to those same constructs from when we first arrived. That is not to say that is, and I want to be real clear. I don't believe that is every person of a race opposite from African Americans, but it is clear that we have the more progress that is made. Look at, you have the and I have to be careful because of some of my other affiliations politically, but or means of seats of service and authority in terms of local elections and what have you. So I have to be careful. I can't advocate for or against a particular candidate. And that's not my point. But if you look at, I don't know if you've read, We Were 8 Years in Power by Ta-Nehisi Coates. And it talks about how immediately, like during the Reconstruction era, after the slaves were freed and began to, come into political power, and at, that 8-year period, there were more Black elected candidates, more Black elected senators and House of Representative members and local government elected officials than had ever existed, and likely still. We had multiple folks in the Senate, whereas now I don't know that we've ever had more than, we've got 3 Black members of the Senate now. But for a long time, we only had, it took until the 1980s, early 1990s to get the first African American senator after Reconstruction. Literally almost 130 years. Whereas during that time, there was plentiful, Black representation in halls of power and policy was plentiful. And that book, Ta-Nehisi Coates in his book, contrasts the 8 years following slavery with the 8 years since the Obama presidency, and the harsh level of digression following that 8 years of Reconstruction, which seems to mirror what we are currently seeing.
Mhm. Let me ask you this. More of an observation than a question.
Sure.
Does from where I look at it, and what doesn't make sense to me, like the old folks say, that dog don't hunt. What doesn't make sense to me is when you stop and consider the mistreatment of the African slaves by the oppressors for hundreds of years. Then they were supposedly given their freedom. Here you can have your freedom. So now the African slaves have their freedom. And then somewhere along the line, it became important to the Black man and woman to be considered equal to the oppressor. The very person who committed heinous acts against the entire Black race born here in America and stolen and brought here to America. I've never been able to wrap my mind around the idea that here we are in 2020, still begging white people to see us as their equal, still insisting to them that Black lives matter when they clearly don't, because if they did, it wouldn't need to be called Black Lives Matter. It should be Black Lives Should Matter. It makes I cannot wrap my mind around the concept of wanting to play their game, wanting to play by their rules, begging to be included, and begging to be equal to the very people who broke your spirit and stole everything about you. It makes no sense to me that here we are. Seem like we need a new struggle, something new to fight for, because what's going to be different all of a sudden? Because now they're still rioting, they're still marching, they're still protesting, they're doing everything that they've always done, expecting something to be different. 5 Black people found hung in trees, talking about it was suicide. And the Black man's idea in Raleigh was to go push down a statue, tie the statue up to a car, drive it down the street, and then put a noose around its neck and then hang it from the stoplight. So while it's killer nigga season all over the world, and Black people can be seen swinging rotten in the sun because they chose to do whatever, Black people idea of fighting back is hanging a statue. I just don't understand. It just seems like we keep talking about the same stuff and nothing's changed, and all I'm hearing is progress. But here we are, right where we've always been, trying to play by their rules. Anywho, I digress.
Well, let me react to that. One of my favorite quotes, and I'll start there. One of my favorite quotes, and I know we've had some discussion around civil rights leaders and what have you, and I think I understand some of your perspective, which is not my perspective, but I respect your opinion.
Thank you.
But one of my favorite quotes is that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. That is as an advocate, some days you lose, some days you lose badly, but the wins that you experience give you the ability to go on to the next fight. So that's a personal favorite quote of mine by Dr. King. And in that, what I mean to say is, I think that it's undeniable that we are dealing with some of the same issues that let me say it this way. At almost 45 years old, I don't think that I've ever seen or witnessed racism and racist behavior at the level that I see now in our discourse, in our, within our political structure, within just everyday life, that I've never seen that. And I've lived in North Carolina my whole life, in various parts of North Carolina. I grew up in Eastern North Carolina. I don't remember, and I've always been aware of issues around race and equity, since I was a little girl. I don't ever recall seeing this level of racial hatred, as I do now. So clearly, there's digression. That is that is undeniable. I do think that we exist in, somewhat like Ta-Nehisi Coates says, this pendulum that swings back and forth. We make some level of progress. There's some digression by those who don't appreciate or don't believe that progress is appropriate. We make some other level of progress, and it's a back and forth. So I understand. So when you're going back and forth, it certainly can appear as though you're not making any progress. However, to look back at where the African slaves started, and to look at, I don't know that we've made the collective process. I don't know that we've made, I know that we've not made the collective progress that we need to make, but I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that progress has been made. For instance, when President Obama was running for office, I recall my grandfather saying, "You're wasting your vote. You're wasting your vote. There's no way he can win. I'm not throwing away my vote. I'm not going to vote for a black man, not because I don't believe he's capable, not because I don't, it wouldn't fill him with a personal sense of pride as a black man himself who recalled paying a poll tax when he first began to vote. And my grandfather only passed last year at the age of 88. But because he did not believe that it was possible in this country for a black person to be elected. Aside from the policy issues, we're just talking about a black person being elected, enough folks to vote for him to cause him to enter into office. Well, clearly that happened. It happened twice. So it's difficult for me to say, well, and this is not a policy issue. I'm not trying to get into the policy of President Obama. I'm just talking about the fact that I don't know that I thought initially that a black person could become president of this nation. Literally have enough, because it couldn't take.
You know why I thought it could happen? I'm gonna tell you why I thought it could happen. Because if the system wanted to happen, it will. I thought it could happen.
Well, even to get to the point where a system chose, if you believe that the system chose a black man
to sit out front to distract all the black to distract
when has the system ever chose a black person? Never, to lead a country. I've been in positions of authority, and it is not always easy for folks who are used to being in authority to submit to the authority of someone who's African American.
I think that
I don't believe that that's an.
That there is always a big. I'm taking the mic back. I think that there's always a bigger picture. I think that and mind you, when I pose these types of scenarios and things of that nature, it's not to say that it is what it is. It's to say that it's a possibility. And when everybody was like a black man couldn't be, I was right along with them, like a black man wouldn't be a president. But then I got thinking to myself, I said, Robin, now if a black man ends up being the president, what will you think of that? And I would think that he was a plant. I would think that he was in on it on some level. I would feel like there's no way this black man could be sitting in the White House without somebody pulling some major strings, because it's just not something that seemed feasible in the United States of America.
Well, to that point, I would disagree pretty vehemently, simply because the level, what seemed clear to me about the Obama presidency, or rather the policies, love or hate or whatever,
I'm indifferent.
certainly. But my point is that what that presidency did was to extend, whether it was healthcare, whether it was, other opportunity, to try to widen the circle from a place of exclusivity to become more inclusive. And clearly that was not welcomed. So it would seem to me that if he were a plant,
To me, Obama
then,
included everybody but Black people.
well, I disagree with that. Because I disagree with that. And the reason why I disagree with that is because of our plight in society, because we find ourselves at, having the worst health outcomes, because we find ourselves having the widest income disparities, the widest educational disparities. First of all, any improvement would have benefited us because we're already, at such a disadvantage. However, I do not think that President Obama could be just Black folks president. I don't think he could have done that.
He
And
wasn't.
certainly not as when you are the first of.
Wasn't
I don't
just
know
Black.
if you've ever had the. I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to be the first Black person at something. But when you are a first, that is an incredible weight, because every person that comes after you is going to be judged by that. So there's a very, and I'm not an apologist for him, but what I am
I don't
saying
think
is I
we've
know
had
what
our
it,
first Black presidents. I
I
think
know what
we had
it,
our first mulatto Black president.
well,
We've yet to
that's the
see.
point. I
I would have.
mean,
I would have respected my first Black president to be a Black president. And I'm not saying that Obama
well,
is Black, because they say if you got a drop of Black ink and you're Black. I'm just saying, if I'm gonna err on the side of reason and logic, and I try to, I don't think we've seen our first Black president, and I don't think we've seen our Black president that can even remotely relate to the common Black man.
I would disagree with that. I would extremely disagree with that.
Okay.
I do think based on, at least from my perspective, and that's not to say, I think that people expected President Obama to be able to come into office and within 4 years,
I had no
really not
expectation.
even eight, but within 4 years, well, maybe not you, but I think broadly, I think I think the Black community expected President Obama to be able to come into office and within 4 years undo the ingrained um, systems in this country that have persisted for 400 years. I don't think that would have been impossible for the blackest Black man to put it in, your, the perspective that you're offering. I don't think anybody could have done that, because again, the arc of the moral universe is long. It bends towards justice, but it doesn't necessarily make 90-degree turns towards justice very, very often. I think, and my point is, it is a long game. I think that is one of the
It's been a long
one
game.
of the quotes that rings in my ears from John Lewis, that this struggle isn't for the impatient, it isn't for the weak of heart, it isn't for those who discourage easily. This is a very long game, an extremely long game. It is not one, for me at least, it is not one that I feel, there are times that I feel discouraged about it, certainly. There are times when the losses seem to pile up more so than the wins. However, there's no way to look at how we came into this country and to see where we are now and say that there's been no progress. That's not logical
The
nor
game,
based in reality.
the game, from a reality basis, that is a long game, that was a part of your quote, is only a long game if you're trying to play by who's cheating's rules. Um,
But
when I look when
go
I look
ahead. I'm sorry.
when I look at what's going on in this world, and I see police killing people on camera, proudly, not even trying to hide it.
That's right.
And when I see this, and I see the level of outrage that is not just coming from Black people, but coming from just about all people. Everybody's out
Anybody with
there.
with a moral compass.
Everybody who is out there who are so outraged. We're with your brother. We're with your brother. But where were you before this happened? And why is it that the people who are with us are only with us when something's going on? And why is it that our people get so angry in this so-called game, and they stay angry for probably about 3 weeks tops? They're out there, they're doing stuff. They're on Instagram and Facebook, just doing the absolute most, because now all of a sudden they're activists. And then you give it 3 or 4 weeks, let something else happen. Now all of a sudden the attention span is short. You don't even hear about the things that take place. That's the game that people are playing. They're playing the
Let me
game.
respond to that.
I didn't finish.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. But the game, because you brought up the game that is long. And I'm saying that is a long game. But that's not the game that Black people should be playing. We are playing a game that we did not invent. We have no control over the rules. We have to beg to have a table sit down to even be able to vote and have some say so about the rules. But here we are trying to play this game that is completely stacked, like literally. And I'm just saying from a logical perspective, and my logic might not always be clear, but it's basic. From a logical perspective, it makes no sense to me. The only reason why the only way this can make sense to me is if this is the only place that we have to go and we have to take it. I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't want to play the long game. I think there's a shorter game. I think it's going to be some casualties and things are going to go wrong before it gets right. But I think that's the short game, and that's going to be changing everything. And nobody wants to break down all these systems that was built on the backs of slaves, built to keep slaves in place. All these systems were built to make the Black man work for free. And that's just the reality of it. Like you said yourself initially about the police officers being slave catchers, everything stems back to keeping Black people in place. I don't understand how a race can supposedly hate us so much and need us so much and love us so much all at the same time.
Well, that's a lot to respond to. So let me try to think about where to begin. But
And
I'll
it's
say this.
it's my
I,
thought process. That's my
I
thought.
understand. I understand. But I want to respond to it. I I don't disagree that systemic racism is a real thing. And it's interesting that the rest of the world is acknowledging, whether authentically or because of the moment we're in, but it's a real thing. It's a real thing that we've been aware of. It's a real thing that we've been affected by, from the lack of generational wealth, from the wealth gap to the, opportunity gap. It's there. I don't disagree with that. However, unless Black folks are going to expatriate out of the country, and I'm aware, obviously, that there were movements towards that with Marcus Garvey and others, and people talk a good game and say that that's, well, we don't need to play this game. But if we're going to be in this boat, in terms of in this country, then we're going to have to, in my opinion,
What?
we're going to have, well, in my opinion, we're going to have to exist within the construct of the society in which we live in. And so, hold on, because I gave
That's
you,
why
I didn't
that's
say
why the
anything
game
for a
is
long
long.
time.
That's why the game.
I didn't say anything for a long time, as you
You said a
gave
lot,
your thought.
Watsi. Go ahead.
While you were talking,
No, not while I was talking, while I was listening.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. No, I'm saying I gave you, wanted you to be able to finish and try not to interrupt. I may not have done that perfectly, so I
No,
apologize.
let me just say this because I don't want it to sound like I'm being funny. Because we're a podcast, so not only can people see the video, people will be able to listen to it too. And for the sake of balance and ebb and flow, I like to kind
Sure.
of go back and forth and pause. So it sounds like I interrupt, but that's just me jumping in because there's no
Oh no,
pause.
you're fine. You're fine. You're fine. Um, but what I was gonna say is, regardless of what ship we came in on, we're all under this umbrella now. And to quote Dr. King again, we're either going to learn to coexist as brothers or we're going to perish together as fools.
But Martin Luther King,
I hope,
in my opinion, didn't do black people no favors.
well, I would,
Be-
again, I would disagree with you. And the reason I would disagree with you is because the reason that we have had protected voting rights up until about 2008 or so, when the most salient section of the Voting Rights Act was allowed to lapse from 65 to at least 2005, which was what, 50 years, was directly a result of, prior to the Voting Rights Act being passed, which was a direct result of Dr. King's efforts. Black folks could not register to vote. As a
Mhm.
matter of fact, that's what the whole, as you know, Bloody Sunday was about. It wasn't even about black folks voting. It was about black folks being able to register to vote. Well, guess what? If black folks can't register to vote, black folks can't sit on juries. That means that any black defendant can't have any jury of its peers because there are no registered black voters, or there were not at the time. So that I think something that we contend with is that we are people who have struggled for a long time. And when you have a people who have struggled for a long time and have seen and experienced discouragement for a long time, then it's easy to look back and say, oh, there's been no progress, because we haven't gotten to the level of progress that, quite frankly, we clearly deserve, and that one would have thought we would have gotten to by now. However, again, there are, small steps along the along the path to, what is it, the quote about, the journey of a million miles starts with a step. We've been stepping for a long time, and I get that. However, to say that Dr. King or any of the others who gave their lives, and quite frankly, who did more than the folks talking, because when was the last time that you, or I for that matter, put myself between a line of state troopers holding guns and dogs? We haven't. We haven't. There's this popular saying, we're not our ancestors. You're right, we're not our ancestors,
We're
because
better
we
than
don't know how. We no, we're not. We know we don't know half of the we don't know half of
I do.
the sacrifice. We don't know half of the sacrifice or struggle that our ancestors knew. We
I
don't
know
know
what
the
I
half of it.
know what I do know. I know that for all the progress that we've made, we're still in the same position we've always been in. And
I
I'm
don't
not
know that
saying
we're in the same position.
respect Martin Luther King at all. I think that Martin Luther King probably started out with the best intentions. I think he probably started out with the best intentions, but even at the end, he said that he feared it was too late because he said he was leading his people into a house that was on fire.
He
Too
said
late.
he said he feared that he was leading his people into a house that was on fire.
Burning building.
Nevertheless, he pushed on.
No, then they
Never,
killed him. Then they killed him.
well, you also have to recognize that he was always, because people, romanticize Dr. King, right?
God did.
People both of all races in this country. I'm talking about generally, maybe not necessarily you, but generally the idea around Dr. King is that, oh, he was just this great beloved figure. Dr. King was he was hated by black folks because they thought he was stirring trouble. don't upset people. You're gonna make it bad for us. And he was hated by white folks who thought that he was, gonna lead black folks out of their place. So he was not some beloved. History doesn't tell that story. Our whitewashing, so to speak, or romanticizing who he was and his legacy over the years does that. But if you look at the actual pieces from that time, he was not a beloved figure in no means, and many times was, like I said, was one of the most hated figures in this country at that time.
I know that
He
my mama
absolutely was.
got had beat.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Malcolm X had beat in terms of being hated.
I still didn't hear you. It was going in and out. I apologize.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
I said, I don't know, Malcolm X may have had him beat in terms of being the hated person. I
Well,
gotta
he was definitely hated as well. He was definitely hated as well. However, his level of notoriety obviously wasn't as big. But they were both, make no mistake, they were both on the FBI's most wanted list. J. Edgar Hoover had nothing for either one of them. And at the end of Malcolm's life, he at some point decided, wait a minute, I've been wrong,
yeah, they
to
got to him.
exclude
They had to
to
get to him.
exclude um I've been wrong to exclude, to say that black folks are the only people that can help black folks, and need to alter my thinking about this, and wrote profusely about it.
He
Because
lost
at
me
the end because at the end of the day, well, no, I said he wrote profusely about that, about after he had his Hodge,
there. They got
and the transformation. Well, maybe his heart just opened up.
I
Because
don't
at
know.
the end because at the end of the day, hate doesn't produce anything that's enduring long term.
But I'll tell you something else about hate though. Now when we talking about, because it's just an emotion. Love is just a form of an attachment. Hate is not for me to speak on. But I do know that if you hate me enough to kill me, if you hate me enough to kill my children for the color of my skin, the only thing I can do is hate you back.
But hate consumes both the giver and the receiver.
Well, we're gonna be some consumed people because there's nothing
If
you're
you
gonna get. That let me
if
just
you
say
choose
this. If you come at me with hate in your heart, you get what you come for. And anybody who handles it any other way is a part of this confusion. You treat people the way you need to treat people the way they treat you, or leave them alone.
I
Leave
would
them
disagree
alone.
with that. I
Literally,
would disagree with
you
that.
either leave
And
them alone, but you do not bend. You do not bend to anything that's distasteful.
well,
Mm-mm.
my personal perspective is different. What I would say is that, and I want to say it succinctly, what I would say is that you don't compromise your convictions. You don't waver in speaking truth to power.
Mm-hmm.
Just because someone, may hate me or act hatefully towards me,
I'm talking
that
about I'm talking about to a way that could hurt me. I'm talking about only in the sense that hate could end up hurting me. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about I hate your guts. I'm talking about if you hate me to where you could kill me or mine because of the color of my skin, the only reaction you're gonna get from me is fire. No compromise, no talking, no trying to figure out how we can get on the same page. No, 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 we're not going to revisit this, that. No, now you're going to get what you came for, be war. It would be a shorter game if more people process that way.
well, I think if more people process that way, we would all be dead. If everybody's got a gun and everybody's shooting, then nobody is going to be alive to tell the story or
But
make any
everybody's
other
going to end
progress.
up having
So
guns.
what self-defense is another issue. Obviously, if someone is coming to harm me, I would be out of my mind to just let you advance and not move out the way or protect myself in some means. So that's not what I'm talking about. But the larger point that I thought you were making was that we needed to, as Black folks, adopt this militancy where, all we do is walk around, in this cloud of hate because we've been
No,
hated
that's not
upon.
what I'm
And
saying at all.
well, perhaps I misunderstood your point,
Well, let me rephrase.
but
Wait a minute, because I don't want my listeners to misunderstand. What I'm saying is simply this. No part of me said that I think that Black people should walk around in this shroud of hate and ready to just, you can get it, you can get it. What I'm saying is, if I'm going about my everyday business, doing what I do, and I end up one of these people who are on a t-shirt because the police killed them, and you come at me and you got hate in your eyes, and you are willing to kill me, and you're willing to kill mine because of the color of my skin. The topic started with us saying that, you can't basically hate, just fuse more hate. And that was me interjecting, saying that if you come for me with hate in your heart and you want to kill me and mine because of the color of my skin, I'm going to match you. I'm going to match you and show you how to do it correctly. That is the only way to deal with that type of aggression and that kind of unnecessary, unwarranted hate. That's
but
the that's the circumstance that I'm speaking about. I think
but
we
aren't
should
we talking about?
practice love. If you loving on me, I'm loving on you. But all of this, we need to learn how to get along, and we need to learn. No, we don't. We passed that.
I think we're talking about two different things. We must be talking about two different things, because you started off by saying that we didn't need to play, we didn't need to play the game.
No,
We
no.
needed
This
to
what no.
we
What I
needed to
just
have a
said.
sense of different
What I
rules.
just
But
said.
now we're
What
talking
I
about a
just said
physical assault.
strictly stems from when you said we can't have hate, um, fueling hate. That's what I was just speaking on the
No,
last.
we can't. You can have hate fueling hate. But my point is that it's not productive. It's consuming.
It has to be.
Well, I don't know that it has to be.
If that's the
Certainly,
way
if
they
that's your,
make it, if that's the way they
if
make it,
certainly
what's
that
your option?
if certainly that's your perspective, then that's your perspective. However, what I would say in turn to that is, I think at some point we have to recognize, if we're gonna live in the same country, right? If we're gonna be here now, if you're gonna go,
That don't mean we,
if
and
you
that don't
if
mean
you're
we have to leave. That don't mean we have to leave. I don't understand why we act like we only have certain options.
well, at some point, if we remain, if we are to live in this coexist in the same nation, then you are going to encounter
War.
folks of other races. So, I personally can't subscribe to that. As a Christian, I can't subscribe to that. What I can say is, I believe that racism is evil.
I do
I
too.
believe that we have the responsibility to. I personally, both as an advocate, as a Black woman, as a Black mother, as a child of God, I have a responsibility to speak against whatever evil I see, wherever that's coming from, because that is, in my opinion at least, not the plan of God, because we are all given we're given a level of divine dignity, and that every person is deserving of that. And actually, it would be a whole lot easier. It's really interesting. It would be a whole lot easier for me just to hate everybody that hates me.
But you don't
That
have to
what
hate
is more
everybody that hates you. You need to hate
what
everybody
is
that
more
wants to hurt you.
what is more difficult is to make a disciplined decision to. Now, granted, I'm not letting you just come in my house and, if somebody, I'm a mom, I'm a single mother at that. If someone is coming after my son, I'm gonna be the first person to stand up and say, hold on. I'm gonna be the first person to run to his defense. I'm gonna be the first person to because I'm a protector. I'm a mother. That's what I do. And at that, I'm an advocate on top of it. However, I'm not talking about a physical aggression at this point. I'm talking about just navigating within the system that we find ourselves in. No, we have not made the progress that ideally we would have made. And yes, we are fighting some old battles. However, what I don't think people recognize is that literally the foundation of this nation was built on
Back to
racial
slaves.
superiority. and inferiority, and on the backs of Black people. That I agree with you about. So therefore, it is so baked in that the solution to it doesn't come in what we've been. What 1865 is when the slaves were freed, and what 19 what civil rights era existed from 1953 to 1973. Is it even really realistic to believe that from 1973 to now, which is all of about 47 years, that within 47 years we would have undone all of the remnants that was baked into the foundation of this nation? Of course not. Of course not. So I'm not suggesting that that means that we don't continue to strive. I don't suggest that we don't continue to be, our highest and our best, and continue to demand the God-given dignity that we have. Because see, I see it very differently. I don't see it as begging white folks to accept me. I see it as me demanding that I be treated with a certain level of dignity, because it is my right to be treated
You
as
shouldn't
in
have to.
with that level of dignity.
You shouldn't have to.
You should not have to, but that
What you
we
like
shouldn't have
demand
to do a lot
thing
of
from those
things.
people.
We shouldn't have to do a lot of things, but that is we have had the
That's one of the things
fortune or
we should not do.
misfortune to be born Black in this country, which means there's some obvious struggles that we're going to have to overcome, endure, etc., that perhaps other folks don't have. That is the reality of the situation. But that does not mean that I have to live my life as a Black woman, unable to deal with anybody else other than Black folks. That
But no one,
I don't
but no
believe
one
that's
said
just.
you should subscribe to that. No one said you should.
I don't. I absolutely don't
I don't know where
subscribe
you
to it.
came from with that at all. I
I,
can say
that's
this.
that's
I
what
can,
I hear you saying. Maybe
but,
perhaps I'm
but, but
perceiving
that's but that's not
incorrectly.
what I said at all. What I said is love. You need to love who love you. And just because
I
somebody,
and I
wait a minute, I said
go
what
ahead.
I don't want to be misunderstood if I can help it.
Sure, sure.
I said I love who love me. And just because you hate me don't mean I hate you. I could be indifferent. I might not care that you hate me. But I say if you hate me and you trying to kill me, then I'm gonna give you what you came looking for, which is your mirror image. Um, in my 51 years on this earth, I don't see anything new. I don't see anything new. The only thing that I see that is different is the fact that a young lady pointed out the other day that Black people can marry white people now, and
And that's been long.
every,
That's been long.
everybody has camera. I'm talking about from a optical perspective in terms of when I look out my window, the
Okay.
struggle continues. The struggle has
It does-
evolved into something. It's what it's always been, just morphed. It's just up to date. And I think that it's amazing to me. It's amazing to me that we as a people, and maybe begging isn't the right word, but we as a people are insisting on being included in something that only meant to include us for free labor. And now we're like, okay, now we free. Now we want to be like y'all. What? For what? Be like them
Well,
for what?
I think that if you look at the founding documents of this country, within it reveals something real interesting. It says, in order, I believe the Declaration of Independence says, in order to, form a more perfect union, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident in order to form a more perfect union.
Mm.
I definitely agree that we weren't included in that ideal. However, the plain language, the plain construction of that language reveals that the union was not perfect, that it was imperfect to begin with. Clearly, it was. If it had within its ranks um, millions of Black folks that it expected to be able to control and cajole and hold at bay forever, and not at any point expect that, oh, they're going to have a problem with this at some point, or that
I think
they're
there's some
going to outgrow this
masterminds.
control.
I think there are some masterminds somewhere who are hired just for this purpose, And I think that we're like puppets on a stage, and people are just being pushed and prodded to go in this direction and that direction. I don't think nothing in this world is a coincidence. And I do believe that people would have the presence of mind to think that one day we're gonna lose control. We're gonna lose control of these here niggas. We need a backup plan. What can we do? And plus the fact we can't produce melanin. How can we? And they have it, so we can't really get rid of them because we kind of need them. I'm just saying, I might be a conspiracy theorist type person, but I just
Yeah,
think that
no.
I think somebody somewhere is paying a close attention to social media. And I think that and the internet and how people move and things of that nature, with the way that we process and the way that we think and algorithms and all this other stuff in terms of driving people to look at what we want them to look at, buy what we want them to buy. Why wouldn't people be a part of that social experiment? And has
Well, I,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I'm not a conspiracy theorist by any stretch.
I can tell.
However, I do think clearly that, well, because I tend to try to deal in logic and
I'm dealing in
analyze what is before me. um I definitely think clearly if companies determine, if I'm talking to someone, literally one day I was talking to a friend of mine who's just started medical school, and she and I were having a conversation about medical school, and I look at my Facebook feed and see that now an ad has popped up about medical school. Clearly there is
nobody's paying attention.
something going on with respect to, subliminal marketing and, and those issues. So I'm not saying that there is no truth to that. I'm not even saying that there are not elements who, for whatever agenda they may have, um, do not profit from, the division of people, or do not profit from, how people think and move and purchase and what have you. I'm not saying that that is not so. However, I do think at the end of the day, I believe in, providence. I believe in, divine ordination. I don't believe that I don't personally believe that from the time I was 4 or 5 or 6 years old, that I was so drawn to issues of justice and so drawn to issues of inequality. And I would literally at that age, listening to, various speakers speak about those issues, would literally have chill bumps at the age where most folks are just, outside playing. I don't think that it would have been possible for me to have been affected by those things at such an early age if there were not some divine plan that I was supposed to have some personal um, stake or some personal role in trying to make some change occur. So if I accept then your premise, then the logical conclusion of that is to say, oh, ain't no need of me. What is my life worth? What is my life work about then? Because there's no way to achieve justice. There's no way to achieve equity. And I just don't believe that is so. I do believe
There
that
was
for
no
whatever
way.
reason,
I
you
didn't say
know,
there was no
I,
way.
I don't believe that there. I do think that sometimes I have literally asked in prayer. I've literally asked, well, Lord, why is this so difficult for this group of people? And so I get, just as interestingly enough, in those particular slave narratives that we were talking about, where that question, that lack of understanding, that recognizing the duality of things, and how the Black community suffers at the hands of an oppressive system that has written into its laws the mechanism to perpetuate that oppression. I don't doubt that that is true. I don't doubt that that is the case, but I do believe that, quite frankly, that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. I believe that there are those of us who are supposed to help bend that arc towards justice. I do believe that while this nation has not lived up to it is certainly an imperfect nation. While it has not lived up to its promise, I think Mayor Keisha Bonds was saying, had said something about America has never been America, um, in that it's never lived fully up to its promise for all its citizens. However, I do believe that what is necessary is that we make the demand that it does for all of its citizens, and not even necessarily just Black folks. What I see happen to the Black community, because I'm a member of that community, obviously, and it touches me in a deep way, and it pains me. But I'm just as pained by seeing, Hispanic children who are being torn away from their families at the border. Evil and racist behavior is just wrong in whatever flavor it comes. It has to be called out, and there has to be not just a calling out, not just we're going to be social media activists, but real life strategic planning and steps taken to morph these injustices and to eliminate them. And now I don't certainly pretend to know the answer to, what exact plan is going to make that happen, obviously. But I do believe that both in our professional lives, both in our, personal activism, and even in our personal relationships, that we all bear the burden, particularly as Black people, of demanding and helping this nation usher itself into the fullness of the promise that it makes to all of its people.
I think that I think it's always interesting to talk to people and get different perspectives because it really does give you an opportunity to, reflect later on the and I knew this conversation was going to go this way. I had no doubt in my mind just because of your background. And I want to thank you so much for coming on the Black Bird's Eye View and sharing your perspectives. Um, Most of which I thoroughly agree with. I think that I might be misunderstood, but I'm okay with it. But at the end of the
Oh,
day, at the end of the day, I think that we all have to do our part, and I understand that you've got some things going on that you feel is actively in this moment, not talking about what needs to be done, but being a part of the solution. What are you doing for the Black community that you feel is bettering it?
well, aside from being the only Black law firm in the town in which I live in, and trying to, um, obviously it's a profession and it's a business, but I tried very hard in my professional advocacy to right wrongs where I can, to balance the scales where I can, to leave people better off than they were before they got to my door. Or at least that's my prayer as an attorney. But also, I believe that inherent in being in that position, I've got to be a tangible example. I remember growing up here, there weren't any, Black law firms or Black female attorneys that I could look at and emulate. So every time I get called to come and speak to, a group of kids at church or at schools or, in whatever capacity, even if I've got a mountain of work on my desk, kind of like I do now, I feel the obligation to go because I just recognize that, I've been gifted with some degree of progress, I guess, or gifted with some degree of station. I recognize I didn't get there by myself. I stand on the shoulders of many people who poured into my life. And I just feel the obligation to pour that back in, to be a tangible example. But not only just to be a tangible example, but even in some of my other activities, I guess it's been about a year, a little more of a year now, with some other incredible ladies in this community, founded an organization called Sisters Vote. Um, it's Sisters Vote, which is essentially an organization of ladies. Not it doesn't have to be exclusively ladies, but it is ladies, where we have decided that the political discourse, as well as the political atmosphere, just isn't conducive to folks who are underserved, who are underrepresented, who are poor, who have greater need, and wanting to educate voters, wanting to, try to understand and impact the reasons why, underrepresented communities don't vote and are not as involved in the political process. And there are lots of reasons for that, obviously, but trying to help change that tide. We very much believe, at least, that if the political process is the one in which we have to work within, then we need to show up and our voices need to be heard, and trying to make a difference locally in those spaces and those circles. So though we've been, a bit, and recently I've become was appointed to the Beaufort County Board of Elections, which put some restrictions on some of the things that I can say publicly. But being a part of policy making, in my opinion, is one thing or it's one thing to rap at the door, right? To bang on the door. It's another thing to gather and try to educate and organize. But in my opinion, at least, it's an altogether different thing to have a seat at the policy making table, because then you're able to take those perspectives of those folks who don't necessarily have the seat at the table, and hopefully make policy that positively and upwardly impacts, their lives and their circumstances and their struggles and need. And so in so doing, we've got voter suppression is a huge issue in this country. Hopefully, at least in the Beaufort County Board of Elections, while I'm sitting there, and I don't suggest that the other folks are sitting there not concerned about that, but at least for my part, I want to be an agent for a positive good, for positive change, to protect the right of folks to vote.
I love it.
And that's just a couple of things. There are a lot of things, but we could be talking, in terms of other organizations that I work with and serve with, that, assist with with reentry and placement, job placement for offenders, and leadership and educational development for young people. I just believe that whatever I've been given, I recognize, and I'm certainly not, there are lots of people doing amazing things, but I do recognize that the Lord has gifted me to be able to have some degree of experience or some degree of gifting. And I just believe that, my living would be in vain if I only used that to better my own life.
I totally agree. I think we are all placed here to serve. I really do. I think the most rewarding thing that ever happens when you can step back and see that you help somebody see themselves at their best. So I love it. I love it. It's all noble stuff to me. I ask everyone that I interview the same. I try to, at least. I ask them the same question, and the question is: if you were placed in a position where you could bestow 3 jewels upon the masses, that is, you could tell the entire universe 3 things that would better mankind, and there were no communication barriers, and everyone understood your language, what 3 gems would you drop, Miss Watsi M. Sutton?
I knew that question was coming.
I know you got some food for me. I know
That,
you.
well, that's a massive question. What do you say? If I could, if I had any degree of, voice or influence that could affect or impact nations, um, I would say to live authentically, to be your highest and your best self. And by that I mean to continually challenge your own thoughts and your own predispositions, your own, the things. We all come here with scars and with thoughts about who we are and our circumstances and what have you, but to always be authentically who you were made to be.
Right.
Because I think I think in general we live so far beneath who we're made to be.
We live
Um,
beneath.
yeah, I think we do. I think we live beneath who we were made to be. So to constantly strive, whether that's changing your circumstances or even just challenging yourself to be your highest and your best self.
I love it.
That's number one.
Okay.
Number two would be to live full of love while walking in purpose. Because I don't think that unless I have true concern for the next person, be it whomever, I don't believe then I'm motivated to give. I'm motivated to live at my fullest such that it can impact the next person.
Okay.
Because as you said, when you serve and you clear those obstacles for other people, or you cause, so you've done something that somehow removes a barrier that causes someone to see themselves as better, as higher, as more capable, then you are basically paving the way for that person to be their best and highest. And so I just believe, particularly, we started out just walking in purpose and being committed to that. And I believe that love is what motivates us to give in such a way and to be our best selves in such a way that we want to make, those around us in our world, we want to impact that. And
Okay.
lastly, I would say always, uncompromisingly, speak truth to power. I believe that it's possible to do all three at the same time.
You say
I
speak
believe
truth to power.
truth to power, uncompromisingly. I believe it's possible to live in love and purpose, and at the same time cause change, speak to change,
Be the
whether
change.
that whether be the change even, or influence the change that you want to see. And I think that unless we do that, then we're stuck with the status quo. But by no means do I believe that we're stuck with the status quo. I believe we come here with amazing gifts and talents for a reason. And I believe that reason is to make those around us and our world a more equitable place.
I love it, Watsi M. Sutton. I tell you, we have the best conversations. I'm not gonna tell the people about that other conversation that we had. This is like number two, so this is awesome. I want to thank you so much, and just know that I respect the air you breathe, and that I
Absolutely.
and I th-
Very
and
true.
I think you're doing beautiful things. I think that you set a beautiful example for all the little black and brown girls and black people in general. Um, I understand that your son is in college now.
Yes, he is an Aggie like his mom, going into his junior year.
I love it. I love it. So you got your home to yourself again?
Soon, assuming they're able to stay in, this last semester was cut short. Assuming that's the case, then yeah, I'll be an empty nester again.
I love it. I wanna thank you for taking the time to sit with me and the Blackbird's Eye View listeners. I want to invite you back whenever you feel like chopping it up, because I do believe that you have much to say, much to share, much to give. Um, I hope Washington, North Carolina knows that they got a jewel down there. I hope they are aware of what's happening. And I just want to thank you so much. I want to thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate you.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Ms. Robin. Thank
Well,
you for the spirited dialogue. I enjoyed. Of course, during the day, this is what I do for a living. So, I definitely enjoyed the dialogue and the divergent perspective and the opportunity to kick around these issues are um, that are heavy issues, and that it takes kicking them around and chopping it up and getting into it, I think, to come up with good solutions and good ideas. So thank you for having me. Thank you for allowing me to speak with your listeners. Thank you for what you do. We
welcome.
have to have lots of voices, so thank you.
I love it. I'm going to be putting Watsy's information in the bio. Like I said, you can listen to the audio on our podcast. This article will run. I'm actually submitting it tomorrow, so it's going to run within the next few weeks. I'll make sure I let you know and link you up in all of that. Let me know if there's anything that I can do to expedite or facilitate your process. I'm a fan. Okay.
You are very kind.
Take it easy, Watsi. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great night.
You too. Brief to think.